Ready? Okay. Yep. One more button. Okay, great, thank you. So let's bring the February 20th, 2018 City Council meeting to get to order. Roll call, please.
Councilor Westover? Here. Councilor Warren?
Here.
Councilor Schneider?
Present.
Mayor Lutz?
Here.
And Schneider, Councilor Shump, Cameron, and Baker are excused absence.
Okay, pledge allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So tonight we have a couple of interesting presentations.
May I?
Oh, sorry, please. Schneider got one.
I would request that we consider approving, or placing on the agenda, the approval for a temporary part-time clerk position on the consent agenda, which was handed out to everybody before the meeting.
Okay, second that.
Okay.
You know,
All those in agreement?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, glad to consent agenda. Thank you. Okay. 3A, we have recommendations, updates, and Phoenix High School liaisons. Nothing this evening. But 3B is the presentation of Police Department Space Needs Analysis and City Hall remodel concept. I'm going to have Dave introduce our presenter. Dana.
So, Dana Crawford with ORW Architecture of Medford, and they are the outfit that we contracted with to do this study. Let Dana tell you what they got.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for having us. It's been a delight working with your staff at City Hall and your team at Phoenix Police. Before I get started here, I just wanted to ask if this row of lights can be dimmed at all. If it cannot, it's totally fine.
I don't think we have that technology.
Okay.
Maybe in review chambers.
Yeah.
No, okay. Okay.
Okay.
That's good, right?
On,
That's good.
on,
Want you to have
okay.
darker
No, this is fine.
Okay,
Let's do
great.
it this way. So I'm Dana Crawford, I'm principal at ORW Architecture. We're delighted to be your consultant on this project. Dave Cantor asked us to start with a space needs study and programming concept layout for both the police and City Hall. And we started that project last year and worked with your team and through Eric Swanson, and now we're back with Dave again, which is great. So it's full circle. And I'm joined today by Sarah Winker, who's also on our team. What we looked at are some of the existing conditions that both the police and City Hall are facing. We developed a quantitative numeric program, which you'll see for the police, and working through 15 years of growth, and a concept layout for the police. And we assumed that we would be working within the current exterior envelope or walls of your City Hall building. So we didn't do a specific numeric program like we did for the police, but we did how to optimize the space within City Hall, and you'll see a layout for that. We also worked with Adroit Construction to develop some project costs for both projects, and then we did some light conversation around the possibility of consolidating both City Hall and police. Didn't take it to a concept layout, but just discussed some of the efficiencies for doing that. Excuse me. So starting with the police station first. The existing conditions are, it's in a modular building. It is significantly undersized. In terms of the robustness, the structural robustness of buildings, hospitals, police stations, fire stations should really be, they are required by code to be the absolute top. And modular buildings, by their nature, are affordable, they're transportable, they're at the lowest end, really, of structural robustness. And it is pretty dysfunctional for a police department. And all of those conditions together really do contribute to being a place that is challenging to retain staff over a long period of time, and contributing to it being a stepping stone for police officers to go to other departments. I mean, that's not that wasn't the dominating factor in our conversations, but it is contributing, and it's worth noting. That's contributing to that condition. A little difficult to see at this size, but we developed a numeric program and projected growth for 15 years. So right now you have a little more than 10 staff. In 5 years, it's projected to grow by 1. You really start to see more growth after 10 years, so up to 17, and then doubling up to 20 in 15 years. So what the Phoenix Police are in right now is vastly undersized, I think is accurate portrayal of what they're in right now. And to accommodate all of the functions that they need for a fully functioning police department, it's a pretty big step up in square footage. In part, so what this is showing right now is about 9,500 square feet for the building, plus an outbuilding is a little over 10,000 square feet. And so some of the things that they don't have right now, they don't have basic locker rooms for both sexes. They don't have an emergency operations center. Evidence processing is tiny. There are a lot of spaces that they don't have. And so if you were to right size what they actually need right now, it would be significantly more than what they have. So seeing this program size up to about 10,000 square feet is a pretty big jump, but mostly it's because what they have right now is so small. Other things that an essential facility needs to have, it has to remain operational after a natural disaster. So standard building code is that you get the people out in an earthquake. It needs to stand long enough for the people to get out, or in a fire. For essential service facilities, they need to be able to withstand it through the shaking and be operational after, so that they can be first responders. And it's the building structure is the biggest part, foundation and the structure, but also how lighting and casework and anything that is suspended is actually attached. And then also emergency power. So going through each division very quickly, we have several divisions. This is the administration division. It's about 1,600 square feet. It has the Emergency Operations Center. It has a welcoming small public lobby that feeds to the front office, and the front office then is close to the chief and the lieutenant staff, sergeant, squad, records, and a code enforcement officer and a school resource officer. The patrol division has a squad room is actually pretty small. The larger components are the lockers, and that includes gear bags and ventilated lockers with charging stations and showers and lavatories and toilets. A very small fitness facility, an armory for weapons storage, evidence prep and storage and processing are the larger components. And that is about just under 1,900 square feet. You can see that. The investigations is just under 1,600 square feet. It includes a shared office for detectives, the evidence processing suite, and an interview suite, which the police also don't have currently. So that's a hard interview room, soft interview room, monitoring room. And then the detective office is close to other staff. And in fact, as you'll see in the police layout, all of the staff are located pretty close to one another for cross-motivation or collaboration. The common areas is the largest group. It's about 3,200 square feet. It's got the Emergency Operations Center. That can also be used as a training room for police, to be used also for city staff. It can be completely segregated off from the rest of the building, as you'll see in the layout. It is, additional common areas are a small break room or kitchenette that is adjacent to the Emergency Operations Center, but available to the rest of the building. Again, the gym, the lockers, and public restrooms, which are adjacent to the EOC. And then there's a small outbuilding that is mainly for evidence storage. It can hold 2 vehicles that are being investigated or stored, and some other bulk storage. The other pieces about the site that are pertinent are that it really needs 2 points of vehicular access in case in a earthquake or another event, if one access is blocked off, the other is available. 5 to 10 off-street parking spaces are ideal. If they had to be on-street for public, that is also acceptable. We included covered parking for 10 cruisers and secure parking both for the cruisers and for police staff. So this is the site plan, the conceptual site plan. It's a little over 1.5 acres, but again, this is a hypothetical site. It's very rectangularized. You know, there are some spaces here, there's some spaces here, some space here that is kind of superfluous. It's a little bit set back from the street. It shows a secure gate here. It shows another secure gate here. This is that off-street public parking. This is the main entry with covered parking for the cruisers, secure staff parking. This is that outbuilding. And then this is the police station with a public entry off of the street. And this is idealized, but a smaller lot could certainly be investigated with, that's not a perfect rectangle or has slightly less parking. This is a 3-dimensional view of the site showing the building here. It's got some transparency here. It's got the covered carport sort of style parking for the cruisers in back, and here's that outbuilding. And completely fenced. So this is a floor plan layout of the building. This shows the front entry here with a public lobby. This is that Emergency Operations Center that is adjacent to a small kitchenette, some storage for furniture or EOC equipment, and then restrooms here. And if needed, the entire EOC suite could be completely blocked off from the rest of the building. The public reception and public records staff areas are here. It does have bullet-resistant glazing between the lobby and that reception function. This is sort of the hub to support the chief's office, the lieutenant's office, sergeant's office, the shared squad room, and detectives, and then 2 partially enclosed or could be open office workstations for school resource officer and a code enforcement officer. Records is in an enclosed room here with a file alcove for active files. And so really that is the majority of the staff. This detectives room is adjacent to the interview suite, which is here, and it's sort of a direct line from the public lobby. Also, evidence processing is here, so this is preparations, processing, evidence storage, and a drying room. That is located adjacent to an exit out to the outbuilding. It's also pretty close to what we imagine would be the patrol and detective entry here off of the secure parking area. These are the men's and women's locker rooms. It's got outfitted with some lockers to start, 5 for women and 10 for the men's, but could be expanded to 20 in the men's and 10 for the women's, or if you had a more women or men's in the future, you could switch locker rooms. The quartermaster storage area here for any non-weapons storage needs, and this is an armory and storage cage, small fitness gym area, and then some support spaces for a fire riser room and electrical IT room. Any questions before I move off of this slide?
What do you mean by drying room?
Sometimes you'll get things in that are really wet, evidence-wise, and need to be dried out in order for them to be processed properly.
Okay, thank you.
And these are project costs. Again, we did speak with Adroit about these project costs. It is a concept level space needs and concept study that we performed. And so whenever you're doing work that is of a public nature, you're paying prevailing wage rates, and the cost to do an essential facility building is more than a standard building. So this $360 per square foot times 8840 square feet is the construction cost. And that is assuming that $360 a square foot is not just the building, it's the building and the surrounding site, assuming that that is a pretty simple asphalt and carport and curbs and very basic kind of softscaping with landscape. And then the outbuilding is much less at $220 a square foot times about 1,400 square feet is $310. The subtotal is just under $3.5 million. Soft cost multiplier is anything that is not paid to the contractor. So permits, design fees, furnishings, equipment, things like that. With an estimated project cost of a little over $4.5 million. Escalation is starting to stabilize at about 6% per year. So if you were to start soon, design for maybe half a year or 8 months and do construction for another year, then to the midpoint of construction would be about a year and a half. And so we included the cost of time, or escalation as we call it. And then the total project cost escalated to mid-year of 2019 is just under $5 million. Questions about that? Okay. City Hall is next. This is the existing floor plan layout for City Hall. It used to be the Phoenix City Library. It was a pretty open building, and the mechanical system that is in it is, we understand, is probably what was there when it was a library. Very open system. When you start to compartmentalize, sometimes it's hard for a system that was meant for something to be open to serve something that's starting to compartmentalize. Makes those spaces a little uncomfortable, either too hot or too cold. Also, there's a significant lack of acoustic privacy. I mean, by its nature, it's very open in the middle of the building, with offices along one side and support spaces on the other. And this centerpiece is really highly unutilized. It's difficult for that to be used well as it's configured. And then the public spaces, it's very efficient, but it's really, there's not room for one chair. And so we looked at how to optimize the space layout and create a little bit more efficiency and acoustic privacy, some better windows. Right now, most of these office areas are maybe a 10-inch wide window. And then this corner piece has quite a bit of glazing, and it's so small. I think it's actually the smallest office that the city manager is in, is either probably pretty warm in the summer and maybe a little cool in the winter.
That's purposeful.
Yeah.
That's keeping me awake.
Yeah, okay. So these are just a few images, and most of you are pretty familiar with the City Hall. So this is the sort of underutilized center space. This is a combined catch-all room that includes the mechanical, the IT server, holiday, storage items, sort of a catch-all, and that condition with serving as the city server room is also a vulnerable situation for your server equipment. It might want to be separated out. So we explored several options. This was preferred. What it does is it takes the internal space and it makes it occupied by copiers and plotters and storage and things like that. It makes a larger public lobby, so there is a place to sit. It assumes that these offices along one side get equalized, which means new walls, but it's also an opportunity to provide acoustic privacy for those spaces. We assumed that the exterior walls would be unchanged except for the very front entry and adding in 5 exterior windows where people are working full-time or in your meeting space. The condition previous where you currently have it is that someone who's going to a meeting goes completely through staff offices and back around to this small room. And what we now have is that instead of going through several offices, you go directly back to this meeting room here, which is next to these support spaces. Also, the city manager's office is a little bit enlarged, but also enlarged purposefully so that there can be a small meeting space so that it's not taking up the only meeting room all the time. The Planning Bureau is currently in the back of the building. They're moved up to the front because a lot of the public interaction with staff is either with the city manager or with the planning staff. And to have that up near the front with a planning service window allows them to serve the public, work over some issues through a transaction window, and then if a permit is needed or payment is needed, then they turn and they can do multiple things through that front lobby, or they can go back to the meeting room. There is a small file storage room that is currently windowless and slated to be used as an office, but with these offices and the planning staff up here in the open office area and the city manager at the back, this is not used as an office space, but rather for files and storage. Currently, there's a very small single toilet that serves everybody in the building, staff and public. This creates a slightly larger toilet room for public, which can also be used by staff, but it creates a staff toilet room also. It reduces the break room a little bit, and then there's the mechanical room as well. There was some discussion about maybe consolidating City Hall with the police, or even putting some of City Hall's technology infrastructure somewhere else, either in the new police station or in the Phoenix Civic Center. And so that's a detail, but it's an important one to consider. It could still remain in this location, and we could put it within its own closeted area in the mechanical room, but wanted you to know that. So project costs for the City Hall, this $225 per square foot times a little over 2,000 square feet is just over $3 million. That is assuming that it's completely new systems, new finishes. You know, it's a pretty much total gut of the interior of the City Hall. Soft cost multiplier is a little bit lower. a little over $100,000 for the total project cost of $560,000. Escalation multiplier of 6% for a year and a half is $50,000, and the total project cost escalated to the mid-year of 2019 would be $610,000.
Dana, that top number for construction cost is a typo.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That should be.
You're so right.
That should be 450,000.
Gosh, I'm so sorry.
Like, that's a pretty big difference from
Yeah,
what's
so,
in our
yeah,
packet.
3.18 million. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Thank you. That's right. We did talk about phasing. It probably would be 5 to 6 months to complete. It's a pretty small project, but you're touching almost every system except for structure and foundations and site work. So probably about half a year would be wise to plan. We talked about potential places for the staff to be relocated, but the cost of that, whether it's modular or in the Public Works building here for half a year or at the Phoenix Plaza or whatnot, the costs vary so much that we did not cost that out. And then the efficiencies through consolidating police and city hall. No layouts were done. It may or may not actually result in a smaller building. It's possible if you put the two together that could happen. But there could be the efficiencies of a shared lobby, shared public restrooms, access to that emergency operations center that could be used as a training room, and some other support spaces such as the fitness center and building support spaces. Any questions? Yes.
When you were talking about the police station before, you had a nice table that said over the period of years you'll have more police staff. But I didn't see any yet on the size of the staff here increasing because of population gain.
Right, thank you. We did talk about that. And there is a staff position that either has just been hired or is slated to be hired. And in talking with Eric Swanson and Jeanette and Eric and others, it was thought that there actually would not, that the city could efficiently accommodate most of that without building more space. There are a couple of, there is another space that could be used, for example, in this planning service area, or perhaps one of the office could accommodate another person, a shared office. But generally, they felt like they, with potential space for one intern space or an open office station, that they could accommodate most of that work without expanding to more enclosed offices.
Thank you.
And that's it.
I had a question on the police station. Of course, your layout is all one floor. You could certainly shrink the footprint by going 2 stories for some functions.
Yep.
For instance, the EOC could be on a 2nd floor because it's not a space you're going to utilize every day.
Mm-hmm.
You might
Yes.
not even utilize it every week.
Mm-hmm.
Is the value, or is the cost of building that 2nd floor offset by the reduced footprint of the building?
Generally, no, because the structure for an essential facility is not quite as simple as a non-structure. A non-facility, non-essential facility structure. You also have to have an elevator and 2 stair cores. That being said, the cost of a site that can accommodate a 2-story option versus a 1-story option is larger. Right? So there's some trade-offs there. It's worth exploring if what the city is looking for is a smaller site.
Smaller site and save money. I mean,
Smaller
that'd
site.
be my main concern is, could we save money by going to a smaller
Mhm.
footprint, which would require a smaller site?
I think it depends on the cost of the land. Probably worth an exploration. Some of the things that we've heard for police on a multiple story building is that the closer the patrol is to the ground floor, the better, to be near cruisers and expedients and that kind of thing. But certainly there are some staff and the EOC and the gym and other things that can be on the floor. Any other questions?
It never ceases to amaze me though how much it costs to build, for the government to build versus the private sector. It's so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's true.
Holy cow.
Prevailing wage law is the cost of a project 30%.
$1,400 square foot outbuilding for $310,000.
True. And again, this is idealized, but I would say it's not palatial. I think that the police were their growth assumptions seemed very reasonable, and the jump really is mostly in the size, and it's a fully functioning department, and so some room for future growth. You could probably go beyond 15 years with this. I mean, you can go beyond 15 years with this kind of sized building. It'll start to get a little tighter in some of the office spaces, but it is planned for shared offices to accommodate some of that expansion beyond 15 years, and then in your locker rooms having expansion for future growth is there too. Okay,
Good
thank you
job.
so much.
Thank you.
You can turn the lights on.
All right. Next up, we have a presentation by our police chief, the annual police report. Hello.
Mayor and council, tonight I'll be giving the annual report for the Phoenix Police Department.
Looking very sharp, by the way.
I'm gonna, thank you.
Oh,
I haven't dressed myself, my wife's at the council.
looking good.
I'm gonna try to do it without putting my glasses on, but I found out last night that I'm the first time grandpa, so maybe I should be putting my glasses on. My next daughter. So, anyway, we couldn't get on PowerPoint, so I'm gonna have to sit and go through. I don't know if did people in the audience get a full packet with the report in it. Okay. So basically, and when I refer to a page, I'm gonna be referring to the page on the top right-hand corner in your packets, and not the page number on these at the bottom. Okay. So the first few pages is just letter, index, things like that. Page 2, we just talk about the areas that we cover, some of the annual events, Dog Days of Summer, Shine and Show, the parade, and the upcoming Easter egg hunt, which I hope everybody's going to be there. Page 3 covers our guiding principles at the Phoenix Police Department. This is basically on a day-to-day basis. This is what we look to as far as how we enforce the laws, things like that. Page 4 is our current employee roster. To the right, you see our DPSST certification. I'd like you to look at the police officer certifications. This is where we're having an issue right now. We just had 3 of our most, other than Officer Patchett, 3 of our most experienced police officers left and went to larger agencies. So basically, everybody on our department except for Officer Patchett, who's been here since before we had patrol cars. I think they were riding horses when he first started back in 1989. Officer Bailey's the only one who has an intermediate certificate. Everybody else is basic certificate, and of course Officer Heisey is currently at the academy. He graduates in April. Organizational chart, real quick. We do have 3 reserve officers currently. We have 2 more that have applied. We're kind of holding off on them until Officer Heisey gets back so he can get through training. And we also ran into as you saw from the previous presentation, we're running into a space issue and trying to find a place for our officers that want to come in. Next page covers our calls for service. I don't know what was going on in 2015, but we had a lot of calls in 2015. 2016, we dropped almost 1,000 calls from 2015, and now we're back up to 9,132 calls, which is a little bit under what we did in 2015. At the bottom of that page, you see response times, average response times. To the left side of that chart, you see priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, and priority 4 calls. We get dispatched, and the dispatch center, when a call comes in, they put in their system what type of call it is. It automatically assigns whether it's a priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, or priority 4. Priority 4 calls for us are mainly code enforcement type calls. In fact, to be honest with you, when I saw that on the chart, I didn't know what it was. I'd never seen one before. And so I had to call dispatch myself and say, hey, what's a priority 4 call? If you look at the priority 3 calls, you might think, wow, a call came in and it takes you guys on average 41 minutes to respond. The reason that is, one of the reasons why the response time is so long for priority 3 calls, a lot of those calls are handled in the office or on the phone. When an officer gets dispatched, he basically pushes a button on his computer that says he's on scene, and that's where, from the time he got dispatched until he goes on scene, that's where these time frames come from. If he's in the office and he gets a priority 3 call, and they call it, it's a telephone call, he doesn't actually go on scene. He picks up the phone and he calls the people, handles the call over the phone. Dispatch is never notified that he's handling that call, so that call stays on the board until they finally realize that it's still on their computer. They call dispatch and say, hey, clear me from that call. And so that's why you see such a huge time frame for the priority 3 calls. Total arrests have been going up steadily.
Hey, Derek,
Yes,
so
sir.
can you know what priority 1 versus number 2 is?
Priority 1 would be an in progress assault type, an alarm call. That type of call would be your priority 1 calls. Priority 2 would be, I don't want to say non-emergency medical calls, because medical calls I think should all be considered emergencies, but those types of calls where it's not a person's type crime where there's the threat of a person being injured or something like that. So that's basically how those break down. Thanks. Mm-hmm. Any questions on that page?
Are there national or state standards for response times? If so, how do we compare?
I do not believe there are standards, like you need to meet this type of deal. But if you look at our times compared to the other agencies around the valley, we're actually a little bit faster than the sheriff's department. So if you think about them, they'll have their 90 deputy covers all of South County. he'll get a priority one call, in the Applegate and have to go from Medford to the Applegate or up at Indian Memorial Road, things like that. But us in Talent, we're pretty close. Where we kind of fall behind is if our officer is engaged in something, say he's at the jail, and another priority one call comes in, we don't have another officer on duty. So it's not going to sit there. A priority one call, if our officer is busy and a priority one call comes in, they'll either send a deputy or they'll send the Talent officer, depending on who's available. The problem is our timing, as far as the time that's on here, our timing doesn't stop when they arrive on scene. It keeps going until we arrive on scene or they clear that call. So that can skew it a little bit too.
This chart here shows the total arrests. 233, 360, 411. No, but that's small chunks, percentage-wise.
Right.
Any thoughts as to why so many more arrests?
I think you have to look at, you have to actually delve into it and find out what the arrests are for. We average what I would consider a high number of warrant arrests, where it's not somebody didn't commit a crime and we arrested them. It's somebody got pulled over, they have warrants, we arrest them, take them to jail for, for basically for other agencies type thing when a warrant is put in the system. So it's just a matter of
There's more traffic stops, lead to more.
traffic stops. A lot of it comes from local businesses will call and complain about somebody harassing customers. We'll show up to talk to them. They'll have a warrant. We'll take them to jail. The work release center just down the road, when their individuals walk away, they always seem to be walking north, and we seem to be the ones that usually find them. So,
On the railroad tracks.
right, railroad tracks or Blue Heron Park. Those are the two spots. Any other questions on that page? Okay, call types statistics. There's a few in here I'd like to go over. You see a lot of percentages going way up, way down. The first one would be the second row, the abandoned vehicle. As you see, we've got a 77.9% increase. That has a lot to do with we were able to hire Tim Muck as our code enforcement officer. So he's out there looking for these types of things, noticing vehicles parked on the roadway that have been there for months at a time, tagging them, things like that. And another thing you need to keep in mind is that just because there's a call listed there in the number, that doesn't mean that the officer took that action. 201 abandoned vehicles. What we do with abandoned vehicles is we post a sticker on them. If there's some of you driven around town, seeing the orange stickers on the sides. We give them basically 72 hours to move the vehicle. If they don't move it, then we will tow it. I would say 90% of the time the vehicle is moved, and so basically no action has been taken other than putting a sticker on the window, but that call is still in here as an abandoned vehicle. So, agency assists, we had a percentage change of 114%. A lot of that has to do with this last year. Talent lost, I believe, 3 to 4 officers, and they have been extremely short-handed, and so we have, according to our agreement with the other agencies around the valley, we've done a lot of help with the Talent Police Department, so we've assisted them quite a bit over the last year. Assisted medical calls, they've gone down 114%, and that was, I think you'd see, or I'm sorry, 46%. I think you'd see that if you looked at everybody, all the police agencies and their reports this year. I think you'd see that type of drop. Basically, dispatch has done a better job of when a medical call comes in, getting all the information to see if the law enforcement agency really needs to respond. If it's an emergency where CPR or AED is needed, we will go 100% of the time. But when somebody calls in and says a general illness type thing, a lot of times we won't go. Because
The fire department goes there.
fire department goes, yes. So that's why those calls have dropped quite a bit. Custodial interference, and I'll cover custodial interference on the next page, runaway report, at the same time, because it's basically the same issue. The custodial interference is up 233%, and the runaway calls are 144%. What we sometimes will see is either a married couple or an ex-married couple going through a divorce type thing, arguing about who gets the kids, and for a month, 2 months, it's constant. We'll go over there 10, 15 times in a 1 month period, because anytime the other person doesn't do what that person wants them to do, they're calling us, and it comes out as a custodial interference type call. So that's why you saw an increase there. And the same thing with the runaways. We didn't have that many more runaways. What we had was, I believe there was a 2 month period where two best friends kept running away together. Just would take off, and mom would call and say, my daughter ran away, and we'd go pick them up from their friend's house, and then the next week that one would run away over to their house. And so it was kind of a back and forth. So it wasn't like a huge increase of general runaways all of a sudden happening. Death investigations is 116% increase. What death investigations are, what we call unattended deaths, is anytime somebody passes away and there isn't a doctor present, we'll go and investigate it, make sure there isn't anything questionable about their death. And it just so happened in the city of Phoenix last year, we had more deaths than usual, and they're usually attributed to age, just natural death type stuff. The next page, page 8, at the top, parking violation. That would be the same as the abandoned vehicles. Just having to muck out on the street more is causing us to locate more parking violations. Shoplifting, that has a lot to do with the businesses. 2 years ago, Home Depot didn't call us for any shoplifters. I mean, 2 years ago, you could actually go into Home Depot, grab something off the shelf, walk out, get in your car and leave, and they would never call the cops. They counted it as cost of doing business. I mean, you could literally steal anything you wanted from Home Depot and just leave. And if they would try to stop you at the door, but they can't, they don't allow their associates to actually physically try to stop you. They just try to stop you and throw stuff in your car and take off, and you'd be fine. But as of 2 years ago, or about a year and a half ago, they decided that they finally realized, okay, people are starting to know that we're not going to do anything, and we're started losing a lot of merchandise. So they hired a full-time loss prevention person, and they are now prosecuting for anything. So now you can't even steal a light bulb. They'll call us for a light bulb.
I didn't know blue light bulb.
What?
I didn't know blue light bulb.
Any light bulb, they're going to call us. So that's why I think you see an uptick in the shoplifting.
Right.
It's because Home Depot started reporting those. Any questions anybody want to go through any line items that I didn't cover there?
Is there anything that stands out to you as being trouble?
Trouble? No, I don't see a big increase in anything, or if there is a big increase in something, I can usually find a reason why, and it's usually not anything that's, attributable to really anything. It's just what it is. Everybody asks me about Phoenix, and I tell them it really is compared to the other cities in the valley. We really do have a great community. Citizens get involved. We get calls for, that was one of my biggest issues when I was over on the coast in Curry County, was nobody would ever call us. And all they would do is complain. You get complaints in the newspaper, but nobody would ever call us. The people here call us and they report suspicious activities, which allows us to go out and find out exactly what's going on. So with the community support, I think we have a great community and something to be proud of. I'm proud of it. So. Anything else?
You still driving each shift? They're trying to go twice around all the city streets.
That was put out in by me in a general order, however many years ago that was.
Still doing it?
That is, they better be.
Nice. Great. That helps the exposure and people like to see it come by.
Patrol division, we currently have 5 officers on the road with 1 in the academy. And once he gets back, we'll be fully staffed on the road. Great group of guys. They keep getting recruited by a certain agency, I won't mention, the Sheriff's Department. And I believe there's a very good possibility I may be losing one to the Sheriff's Department next month, unfortunately. But the group of guys we have, the core group of guys we have is really good. I'm really proud of them. They work hard. They enjoy working here. I can only see within the next 2 years, maybe one of the officers that would possibly go somewhere else. Every time I ask him about it, he's like, I'm not leaving. So we'll see. Next page, traffic safety. You'll notice that the traffic citations went down significantly. That was due to the fact of the manning shortage, and we had to pull our traffic safety officer off of his duties, so we actually haven't had a traffic safety officer for the last almost 1.5 years, I believe. So that's why you see that number drop. Accidents, nothing significant there. It's stayed fairly steady, 15 more than last year. One fatal, and vehicle versus bicycle hasn't happened recently, which is good, and the vehicle versus pedestrians have gone down.
Was that by chance the fatal accident of vehicle versus pedestrian, or was it a vehicle?
No, it's just the vehicle.
Gotcha.
And it's, yeah, that was the wrong way driver onto I-5.
Has that overpass added additional accidents?
The numbers don't indicate that. The only, other than that one, the main issue we're having is people coming off the freeway, and for some reason it only seems to be the southbound vehicles. and turning towards Home Depot and not yielding right away to the cars that are coming across that thing. And yes, that could be attributed to when you're coming off there, you're not used to looking that way to see if the car's coming, you're used to looking here to see if the car's coming. So people that don't drive that a lot might have that, but we really haven't seen that hasn't been an issue. We've actually had more accidents at the Grove Way and North Phoenix Road intersection for some reason. People running red lights, getting to Home Depot or coming out of Home Depot, type thing. Everybody knows about our school resource officer. Stays very busy. Officer Patchett's been doing a fantastic job. The school loves him. He's handled 301 calls for service last year, which I don't know how many days of school are you in every year? Do you know what? 180 something. Okay, so that's almost 2 calls for service a day for the school resource officer, and they're broken down there. Nothing jumps out at me there. Assaults are way down from probably 2 years ago. So that's a good thing. Great group of kids too, they really are. Next page, our reserve officer program. As I mentioned, we have 3 right now. 2 more are trying to get on with us. And actually 2 of the 3 we have right now won't be leaving, as far as leaving for other full-time jobs. They don't want to become police officers full-time. And so that's good if we can get a good contingent of those types of people, because they volunteer and it's good to have them around. So, field training and evaluation program, I've covered that in the past when we've talked about hiring new people. It's a 16-week program that they attend or they go through after the academy on the job training. Code enforcement officer works 15 hours a week, so less than 3 days a week, and he has 813 calls, so he stays very busy. I hope that you have noticed, because I definitely have. There's a few trouble spots that we've had in the past that have really been cleaned up. Records division, Paula Stroop. Couldn't do it without her. She's fantastic. Handles all the stuff nobody likes to do. Part 1, 2, and 3 index crimes are broken down there for the last 2 years. And when you ask me about priority 1, 2, and 3 calls, they don't coincide exactly, but fairly close. The part 1 crimes there at the top would definitely be priority 1 type calls, especially in progress type stuff, and then your lower priority calls are part 2 type things below that. Any questions on that page? Cover the evidence room. What's in the evidence room? I think most of you have come through the office for a quick tour, and you've seen the shortcomings we have there as far as a room type thing. The next page is our training program. Lieutenant Price is in charge of the training program, and the officers are mandated or have 84 hours of mandated training minimum through DPSST every 2 years, 3 years. 3 years. We are well above the DPSST standard. And the next page is fingerprinting services. We do offer fingerprinting services for nurses, teachers, things like that. They can come to us. Cheapest price in the valley if anybody needs a free fingerprint study. And some of the kids at the elementary school made a bunch of signs for us a couple years ago, or last year, and they're hung up around the police department. There's our contact information. Any questions?
Very nice, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, just put in a plug for you. If you go on vacation for more than a couple of days, you can fill out a form you give to them, and they will make sure your house is secured while you're gone. They've been very good at that for me. So thank you.
Yes, so you just come by the police department and fill one out. You could probably actually call Paula at the front desk and she would probably fill it out for you. Just make sure you leave, if anybody's gonna come by and check on your house as well, or feed animals, things like that, make sure you let us know who that is and what they'll be driving, so we don't go yell at somebody for being in your house when they're supposed to be.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have public comments. Sandy, one,
Oh, sure. Here? Oh,
come on up here to the main table and give us your
oh, sure.
name and address.
Name and address, Sandy One, 109 Abbey Street, that's in East Phoenix. Little background, I am a member of the Parks and Greenway Commission, and our subcommittee officially is V-City, represented by Sharon Schmidt. I also am a member of the Blue Heron Committee Garden under steering committee, so we can be a real asset to Blue Heron Park by maintaining one of the prettiest community gardens, I think, in this series of small towns. And used to be on the budget committee for a few years, which is really an endurance contest. And you are to be commended if you go through that process. The city council does have to do that. And what this is really just a short advocacy for a very robust Parks and Greenway budget to be funded in the upcoming cycle. There's a lot going on in the Parks and Greenway all the time, and more coming. And you've got a heavy load with the Parks Master Plan. If you look at that implementation schedule, there's a lot of funding dollars there proposed. Also, there's a little funding proposal, I think that's still on the table for the transfer of the urban renewal property near Blue Heron.
That's a discussion.
That's under discussion, so we won't touch that. That would be a real plus for Blue Heron Park. It would fulfill some of the master plan issues for parking, which is a top priority. And that leads me directly into, I think, I don't want to ramble, but I think a series of support thank yous is in order. That was my main goal for sitting up here. We've had such support from the city council, their liaison Stuart, and he's not here, or is Teresa, but Ray DePasquale attends every meeting, and his input and knowledge and expertise have been so helpful to the commission, amazingly so. We're in close touch with the Joint Greenway Parks Power Agreement representative from Jackson County, Stuart again, and Ray, our coordinating persons, and that's so important because the Greenway really touches Blue Heron, and it's a real, sometimes, safety concern, and we like it that the Jackson County is a presence and a united force of every town on the Greenway. That's real important. Other people who help us are, actually the police department. You guys, when you patrol, make visiting parks a pleasant and safe experience, and we appreciate that. Also, on events, to continue with the police, your services at the Easter egg hunt, just maintaining a presence again, and also distributing those free fingerprint kits you were talking about. These are all services that are so critical to success when we hold a community event. Oh, and the mayor's.
I didn't know.
Oh, I thought you were saying Okay.
I would never, but you just have a few more seconds.
Oh, Oh, okay, so those are the thank yous. If I forgot anybody, I apologize. The fire department participates. It's like a combined city effort. Everyone is outreach and everybody responds. And the only other thing I want to mention, and hope you put in the budget, because this is, I think, it's deeper in the budget, is an events coordinator. The commission is happy to respond and participate, and we get citizen volunteers. But if you get an events coordinator, you'll be able to utilize the new city center more effectively. You know all this. And we're just hoping that you'll schedule many events for Phoenix that draws the community together, and time's up, right? Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much. Good job. And Sharon, you're gonna speak on the issue. I was gonna call Lila now, but you're gonna speak on the issue that you're,
Oh, well, we can go first.
yeah, but
This
you're
is
gonna
like
speak,
the Academy Awards.
but you're gonna speak on the sign issue, right?
Right.
Okay, so that'll be a little bit later. I'll have you speak when the issue comes up.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. This is just for items not on the agenda right now, and Lila's got one doozy to talk about. Come on, Lila.
I'm Lila Heigl, 116 Samuel Lane in Phoenix. I've come to talk about a time capsule. Several years ago, when we had our 100th birthday for the city of Phoenix, there were a lot of community people that planned a lot of events. And in that planning, not everything was accomplished. So there's a time capsule that my husband created. It's housed at the Historical Society right now, but it was never filled or used. And my idea, which I took to Al Muhlhofer at one point for urban renewal, was to put it in the cornerstone of the Civic Center. That's done a lot in cities for building. So then I thought, well, what do you put in it? That would seem to be a quandary before. So I researched it online to find out what city people do inside of a container. And some suggestions were local newspaper, who your city officials are, population, photos, predictions, and when to open. So the reason I'm here is to get your input, and if you have ideas, and to further this request from me, I'm willing to put it on myself. I need help with official things like who would I talk to have to implement it. But I appreciate any ideas you have, and Mary has my phone number. If you want to call me, or he has my email,
Yell across the street here.
or you could, yeah, you could drop by.
But she's willing to put together, we talk about later on, the committee to help with the time
Yes.
capsule event
Yeah.
for the launch of the Civic Center. It's a
I
great
think
idea.
it would be neat to
Yeah.
bury a time capsule in our new city.
Yeah,
So,
we can talk about that.
okay, thank you.
Caroline, you want to know what's something not on the agenda?
Of course.
Okay, come on up.
I think I'd make it to this part. I had to work. This is one of my favorite ones, is the, when the police do their thing, 'cause I can read it and understand it. I love it. What is that sound? I don't know. Oh, okay.
Oh dear.
My name is Carolina Marshall, and I am the volunteer coordinator at the community center, the First Phoenix Community Center / Presbyterian Church. And I was looking at the minutes last time, and I may have misspoke or whatever I did, but Alfred Mueller, and that Mueller, Alfred Mueller is still our chef at the community kitchen. He just spent a couple extra weeks in California. And he's preparing baked ham and vegetables for our supper this Thursday. And there'll be an apple dessert, because we got a whole bunch of apples from Access, and it'll be very delicious. That date is February 22nd at 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. And I think that's all about it. And I just love, Sandy, what you said. I'll support you, Lila, and I'll help you with the time capsule. And the police are one. They always come and help, and I get it right away. And thanks to all of you too. And Dave, you're back for a while. Nice. They're all happy about it. They really are. He's like, we'll take Dave. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Caroline. Very nice.
Thanks.
Next up on the agenda is the consent agenda. We've got number of things in the agenda. One is resolution number 1008, resolution authorizing the transfer appropriations to prevent over expenditures appropriations fiscal year 2017-18. Resolution 1009, resolution establishing officials for the purpose of signing on behalf of the city of Phoenix for city funds to replace Eric Swanson with Dave. Number 3 is authorizing emergency contract for snow and drain repair in the Phoenix Hills area. And then we had to add something to the agenda this evening, approve a temp part-time county or court clerk position because Jamie's leaving and we the minutes from last time. Anybody want to pull anything from the agenda? No? Okay. That's it. I'll accept a motion to approve this on the consent agenda.
I move approval of the consent agenda.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay. That's unanimous. Next up is a request for city funding for directional signage for pollinator mural. I think I'll have staff speak on it first, and I'm gonna have Sharon come up, okay? So, that was requested to have this put on the agenda. I said yes, and it's not, Dave's gonna speak, not in favor of it, there's some issues to work out. Why don't you go ahead first, then I'll show you up.
That I don't have much to add beyond what's in the agenda report. And you kind of request from Sharon Schmidt for the city to provide funding and a letter of support for directional signage on Interstate 5 and directing motorists to the new pollinator mural in the shops at 24. I didn't feel that I could unilaterally approve that request. There is no money specifically budgeted for this purpose. However, we do have what we call the tourist usage fund, and you could, I think, you could use the money in that fund for this purpose if you chose to use it. In addition to the signs on 5, potentially 8, 9, I think we would also have to talk to ODOT about whether they would allow us to do additional signage around the interchange, because if someone pulls off the freeway and they don't know where the mural is, they're probably just going to get right back on the freeway and keep going. So we would need signs into the shops at 24. I want to be clear, I know there was a little bit of a vituperate email exchange. I'm not opposed to doing this. The concern that I raised, as I mentioned in the agenda report, is one of fairness. And this is something that came up last year when I was interim city manager as well, is people showing up at a council meeting and saying, hey, give me money. And you can certainly do that. But is that the fairest way to distribute public resources? And having said that, I think probably behooves you to hear from Ms. Schmidt and deliberate what you would like to do about this.
Thank you. Sharon, you want to come on up and state your address and
Sure, when I
speak in the issue?
take it today here, but I can't understand what she said. You want to say it again?
Oh, well, I was just mentioning the fact that the Bee City component,
Wait, no, I'm just gonna have,
oh, sorry, then I don't say
Sharon
anything.
and then we'll have council deliberate and talk, so
I'm sorry.
that's all right.
Okay, so, yeah, I didn't expect to be coming up here with my hand out. By the way, I'm Sharon Schmidt, I'm at 4601 South Pacific Highway, and good evening.
Hi.
So, yeah, I didn't expect to be coming for money in the middle of the year, but the thing is that we've created this behemoth mural. It's 300 feet, it's like nothing else that I've ever seen. Nor do I think we ever will see anything like it. I'm going to get it in Guinness Book of World Records if I can. And it occurred to us that it probably would be a good idea for Phoenix to have some kind of directional signs that would lead people to this. And I agree with Mr. Canner. He has just said it all in terms of what's the fairness issue. And he also mentioned that you probably need more signage to direct people to it, because if they just got off the freeway and then just went past it, which I think is pretty easy to do, that wouldn't be any good anyway. So I proposed that there would be 5 tests for whether it would be a good idea to give this money for this project. One is, instead of the fairness test, the greater good test. Is it in the greater good for the city to encourage tourism? I don't know. Is it? You have to answer that for yourselves. I have. I think it is. The interest test. Is it an attraction that will garner interest? I think it is. Judy's had approximately 150 people drop by to paint, and we hope to get a hold of some of those young people that were over there earlier too. The legitimacy test. So is it a city-approved project? And of course, it is. The involvement test. Had the citizens put in exceptional time and effort? And I can tell you, that has happened. There's probably been well over 2,000 hours put in so far, and we are only half done. The value test. Has the city received value? And I would say yes, because it's probably, if you'd hired somebody to do it, which of course you probably wouldn't have, but if you had, it would probably have cost $60,000 to this point. So there's a reason for coming to approach you about signage, and I think they're good ones, but we'll see what you think.
I appreciate the input.
Thank you.
I will, I'll kick it off when we're around the table here. I did speak to the gentleman who manages the 24 shop today, and about the possibility of 24 shops helping to defray the expense. The person you need to talk to is out of town for 2 weeks. Alan DeBoer does own the 24 shops, and his right-hand man is out of town for a couple weeks. So he's not going to get an answer for these. That the city council to consider possibly having the shops join in to help fund it. It's $548 every year forever, plus the cost of the signs. It's not a lot of money, but it's not inconsequential either. With that said, who wants to speak about it?
The issue, and thank you for coming in to speak on this, and for everybody who's worked on the mural and on the community garden. Those are obviously huge, valuable community commitments, and we appreciate everything that goes into that. So thank you for coming. I think the last time that we brought up this issue, it was actually something that Carol spoke on, and we realized that, we don't really have a fund for projects like incidentals that come up. And we have discussed, during our next budget cycle to be able to actually create a line item for those kinds of projects as they come up. Because right now, I think we're in the middle of a budget cycle, that's a little bit more complicated. Dave did mention the tourism attraction, or I'm sorry, what was it called?
The tourist usage fund.
Tourist usage fund. And I don't know what's in that right now. I don't have our budget in front of us. Do you have a sense of what kind of level of funding is there?
So I think there's about $9,000 in there, and this is the restricted portion of the transient lodging tax money that you are required by law to spend on tourism-related facilities and tourism promotion. Now, I don't want to get all legalistic about it. I think.
Get permission from the lawyer.
You're here for it. And technically, a tourist is defined by law as someone who comes from more than 50 miles away and stays overnight. And so, would we be generating tourism with these signs? As a matter of law, probably not. But do I think anyone would challenge the use of money? I highly doubt it.
I just wonder if we have like clear goals for the use of that line item. I think that we need to be clear in whatever decisions we make that have to do with any amount of funding, of why we're doing that, what that's coming from. be something that kind of sets precedence. So, you know, if somebody sees the signs that we put up for the Bee mural, what's to say that 5 other organizations don't come to us and say, well, we really feel our businesses or our organizations are tourist attractions as well, and so we want the city to pay for it in the same way that they paid for the Bee City mural. So I think everyone here has an appreciation for everything that you all do and for the Bee mural. I think it's gorgeous. I think the question is just how do we actually create clear guidelines for how money is used that's taxpayer dollars. And I think we have more of an opportunity to do that when we come into the next budget cycle to create a new line item for projects such as these. So that might be something that comes up in the future, but those are kind of my thoughts.
I kind of share similar thoughts with you. And, you know, as far as discussion, I think that we should be creating a process for this as well. How do these requests come in, and how do they go through a fairness test that, you know, we can assess for quality and need and so on and so forth. So I think for myself, I would like to see, you know, us leaving with the idea that we're going to create some sort of a process for accepting these, you know, maybe through a grant application or something along those lines, and then we can budget for that as well.
All being said, that's a future kind of structure of doing things. I think for this particular project, my wife and I did paint a couple of the flowers, and they're at eye levels. So aside from the personal attachment, when I look around the limits of our city, you know, defined by the boundaries, I don't see anything other than potentially this, but right now that differentiates our city from others. So for me, it's a discriminator of some sort, which therefore has some value to the city, because it could draw people in. Now, obviously, because of where it's located, it's going to draw them to McDonald's before it goes to See Amigos and, you know, wherever else. So I think it's something that's worth trying to find funding for. Whether or not we're able to do it through the private sector totally or partially. And I think the people that won't benefit most is McDonald's. But I think the shops at 24 benefit largely, and then we as a third, the downtown part. So if we can find some way to do that with maybe we do use some of our funds because we set up the process for that, but also trying to get commitment from those who will get monetary value from its location. That leads to the bigger question, what else would we put into the city that's not here now that might in fact be a big draw? And if the Bee City thing is an art project, our city center could have art kinds of things, whether it be statues, fountains, paintings, whatever. Just something to think about is what differentiates our city that makes people want to come in off of the highway to spend some time. And I think from being down there at the mural, watching kids paint, there's a lot of excitement for the kids when they go over and paint it, but that's going to end because it won't be painted anymore. But I think there's an attraction for people to look at and draw them off the highway because, oh, this is a place we can stop for lunch or dinner or something. It has some value added to the city overall. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'd like to try to find ways to take care of what the mural, what it is, has a value to the city, but not impose upon the city financially totally if we can avoid it. So it could be fundraisers, it could be private sector donations, and or possibly some of our tourist money if that's an appropriate thing as we structure it. But I don't think necessarily tonight is the time to decide the structural things that they're talking about.
I see 2 things that we need to do. Maybe the typical budget process. Secondly, see if 24 shops would pay for it or pay for it partially. It wasn't, it was not deep six, right? It was open. It didn't seem like a lot of money to them. I thought that's a good source. And I think we should hear from them the next couple of weeks as far as if they can help fund it. I think that's a good possibility, actually.
Okay.
With that said, we need a motion to deny if you want to approve, if you want to approve, with the caveat, like I just said, that we go through the shops, see if they help fund it, and go through a regular budget process, which is coming up March, April, right?
Or we have to just delay it to a later time to see what the
But if we table it,
Well, right, you don't want to
that's
table
kind
it.
of,
You want to delay to a date certain, postpone to a date certain.
you table it, it's gone. So we could delay to a date certain, and we could go back on the calendar at some point in the future. I don't know what that exact date would be, but could delay to a date of approximately, May 1st or whatever.
And I think some of the other paperwork that comes with that, so there's some more research to do about ODOT and other sign approvals and those sort of things. And that has cost too. So we don't know what the actual cost would be for the total package, if you will. So we need to have that research done. And then the research that you'll come in from the shop for 24. And any other ideas people have to save money year over year to be able to fund this thing and then put it together as a package. Sure.
May I offer some feedback
Good, sure.
at this point? You mentioned you were wondering what the cost of the signage is, and until ODOT, they can't give you the cost of the signage, it's very clear. But yeah, you're nodding your head, yes, you noticed this too. So we can't give you an exact cost of what it will be. What Chris mentioned was that it was what did you say, Chris, $500 and some odd on a yearly basis? between that kind of
48,
stuff.
it's over $500 per year.
Yeah, and so that's about the only thing we can say. The process has been a form is filled out, it gets sent into the Bureau of Tourism, and at that point, they decide whether you've actually got a cultural kind of thing that people might want to come see and whether they're going to grant you the opportunity to have the signage. So that's how it works.
I'll just say a motion.
The other option we have, I don't know if this really works, you can postpone to a time certain. You can also make a motion to refer to a committee, which in this case might be the budget committee. Say I move to refer this matter to the budget committee, and then you can have the discussion during the budget committee deliberations, at which time you may choose to set up a grant program of some kind that you're talking about. So those are your two options. Either bring it back to the council for further deliberation, or you can refer it.
I feel like that's the right option for us because we keep having this issue pop up. And I think it's worth addressing, and I think the right body to address it is the budget committee. So, at this,
Since we're all on the budget committee.
yeah, we are the budget committee, or we're part of it, so that's, important thing. So I make a motion that, we refer this discussion to the budget committee.
I'll second.
A second. All those in favor say aye.
This is a debatable motion, so you need to.
Want to do a roll call?
No, you need to ask if anybody wants to comment.
Is there any question?
Debatable motion.
I'll have to ask with the
Any
public.
discussion?
Do we have this, well, any more discussion?
Any further discussion?
That's what you're asking.
Do we want to include, some direction to staff to come up with some sort of process for future grants, or do we want to delay that also?
I think that's a budget committee discussion.
Yeah. Further discussion? Okay. With that said, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes unanimously. We'll refer it to the budget committee. Thank you very much. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you all.
Thank
Appreciate
you, appreciate it.
Well, it's not dead, right?
Yes, appreciate your hard work on this.
All right, you're welcome. Next item is two ordinances, 9A, the second reading of a public hearing, of ordinance number 992, an ordinance amending ordinance 977 to authorize imposition of penalties and interest on late payments of the 3% tax on the sale of recreational marijuana items by recreational marijuana retailers. It's going to require a public hearing, but let's hear from the staff first, we'll do a public hearing. Any staff report? I was just routine, more of a housekeeping.
It is kind of a housekeeping measure in that the ordinance that was adopted by the council following the voter approval of the local marijuana tax contained language that did not exactly mirror the language in the ballot title. So already approved on first reading, amending the language of the ordinance to match what was in the ballot title. This is simply second reading of the ordinance.
And no changes.
There have been no changes.
I move approval.
Well, I gotta do a public hearing
Oh,
first.
thank you.
So I'm gonna open up the public hearing and hear from all those who are in favor of ordinance number 992. Hearing none, I'll open up to people that want to speak in opposition to ordinance number 992. Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing. And we'll go to deliberations. Anybody else speak?
I move approval
Okay.
of second reading of ordinance number 992, an ordinance amendment to authorize the imposition of penalties and interest on late payments of the 3% tax of the sale of recreational marijuana items by a recreational marijuana retailer.
Second. More discussion? Okay, roll call please.
Counselor Warren,
Yes.
Counselor Snyder,
Yes.
Counselor Westhofer,
Yes.
and Mayor Lutz.
Yes. I'm voting because technically, for the quorum, I have to be involved in that.
Just thinking about it.
Okay. Next item up is 9B, second reading of public hearing of ordinance number 993, an ordinance to repeal contents of chapter 3.04, replaced with new rules modeled after League of Oregon Cities 2000 policy for public contracting and purchasing code. And we had a discussion before the meeting about this. And,
Yeah, I know, I've had some time to take a look.
okay.
Okay, so I'll refer to different pages in that were in your packet today. And essentially, the only changes I've made since last talking with you last week was, if you notice, for instance, on page 82, I'll just start at the very beginning, public purchasing code. If everyone's there. Notice I've just put in, instead of, they were using Roman numerals. So instead of using Roman numerals, now I'm actually using the 3.04 extension. So each time there's a change, like Roman numeral 1 will be 3.04010, and then Roman numeral 2 would be 3.04.020, and so on and so forth. It's just easier to find, and when it's codified, you're going to go into your ordinance, you're going to be looking for, you'll see a list of the titles of each one of those. You'll click on 3.04.020 and you get the definitions, for instance. Okay? Note on page 84, if you get down, this is definitions, and if you look down in city, H, you put in Phoenix in there. So it says insert city's name, but obviously it's Phoenix, so I didn't do that. The HI, right below that, we've added city, interim city manager, but that was in before. That was something that I believe Mr. Snyder might have already done, or someone did it. I know it was changed, and so that was in your last pack. That really wasn't a change, but I figured that that was a change. On the next, let's see, what page is it? It's on, I believe it's, it'll be, we took the word auditor out and replaced it with, we just removed it. I'm sorry, I didn't write down the one I didn't write down, this number.
Before the last week, thanks to that person.
Yes.
Decision making.
Yeah, they put in Richard Brewster because he's our auditor, but that's not the right person. So just removed the auditor altogether because we're not using it. And we just said the finance director would be the next person, obviously in line, who would be making decisions with respect to delegating that authority that the city manager would otherwise have. And then after that would be the mayor. So if someone needed to sign a check or sign a contract, it would be in that line. The city manager is not here. Okay, I don't know what page that is in there somewhere. Okay, you go to page 107, and there was a suggestion there that is that it has to do with sale of surplus property, and there it said if you go down to D, let's see, it would be on. Let's see, here it is. Well, it's on page 107. It says restrictions on sale to city employees. Okay. Section. It says city employees shall not compete as members of the public for the purchase of publicly sold surplus property.
I'm not finding it, but
So look at page 107.
I have it.
And it should be down there. It's right above. It should be 3.020. and it should be right above 3.04.100. So look for 3.04.
That's on our page.
That's on page 6. right?
That's on 106.
That's on 107.
Okay.
They got different.
Okay, so it's 106 or 107, but it says it should be, starts there, it says D, restrictions on sale to city employees. And the suggestion was to take the word not out of there. And at first, on this quick read, I thought, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense, but no, it doesn't make sense, because what it says, employees shall not compete as members of the public for the purchase of publicly sold surplus property. In other words, we don't want city employees in there in the bidding war in the public, because especially if I have a city employee in here that knows, what's the goods on this particular product, and it's a surplus property, and he's bidding on or she's bidding on it, it's unfair to the rest of the members. So it's really saying, we just don't want city employees bidding as members of the public for sold surplus property. That's all I'm saying.
No, that's fine, that's not one of the ones that we even talked about.
Okay, all right.
The not thing is a whole different paragraph.
Oh, is it? Okay, which one? And so,
I just go through, I'll do it at the end.
okay, and then I have one more item. It's kind of like the city, it's on page 108. And it's right above the judicial review of special. It's in this sixth cost judicial review down C there. I can see it. Says the decision of the city council may be reviewed only upon petition to the circuit court of, it says county, should be Jackson County. Okay. And those are the only changes. I know that Mr. Snyder was looking at some other items, and he can certainly bring those up, and let's talk about them. I'll explain to you how that works.
No, that's what I'd like to have, just the explanation so everybody understands the way you see it.
Yeah.
To make sure that I'm not wrong. I did find one of the places where you have your little parentheses that says county. For me, it's on page 107 under judicial review, 30410 paragraph.
Yeah, that's one I just went over, I think.
It has county in it.
Yeah, so it should be Jackson County.
Oh, Jackson, okay. Okay. Enough. Let's see. Okay, if you can give us your explanation for on page 90.
Okay, and what will be the 3.04? Which one are you looking at? 3.04.
030.
030.
It's
Okay.
under major D, and it's down under 3, and then it's E.
The authority of the city manager for contracts and purchases.
Yeah, and then it's under E. This is the one where the,
Yeah, D would be D3E.
right,
Purchases of any goods or services in excess of $7,500 from city employees. I would agree, that one should be changed to be by city employees, require authorization of the city manager. So that's a change I would make. Purchases of any goods or services in excess of $7,500 by city employees require authorization of the city manager.
okay? Everybody understand?
That's perfect.
City has no complaints.
We're not worried.
Okay. One other, it appears in several places, I'll just address it in one. And
Sure.
Once we explain that, then these all go away or have to be changed everywhere. 304060 under A 5.
What page are you on?
I'm on 95 on
Yeah.
mine.
Okay, yeah, good enough?
Yeah, it's titled amendments. The small procurement contracts may be amended if the cumulative amendments do not lower contract price to more than 25% of the original contract price.
Yes.
I agree that that's good language. But what happens under two circumstances, which you and I kind of discussed, and I want to make sure everybody else understands it. There are kind of like two circumstances. One is which the contract has just been let, not actioned yet, and they come forth with a amendment that is more than 25%. Or the contract's been awarded, it's in progress, they're working, they're invoicing, and now there's an amendment for more than 25%, which is the extension off of this of other categories of things that can happen under the procurement amendments. So if any of those two things happen, what are the procedures that we should follow, and are they already in the document so whoever's working with this understands what the decision rules are?
Okay, so this is for a small source, a small procurement, something less than $10,000. So let's say you are in the middle of digging on the side of a hill up here or something, and as you're digging, you hit a water line, and so then you can't tell exactly where the casing is, so you bring out a guy to come in here and you start drilling. And before you know it, you're spending 2 or 3 days on what was an otherwise $10,000 job. And it ends up, gosh, I needed to get one more pipe. And I came out and gave me another price and one more pipe after that. And before you know it, you have a $35,000 job, which started as a $10,000 job. Okay, so that's where you typically see something like this, where suddenly I need to make amendment to this contract. Okay. What this requires you to do is to stop. Don't spend $35,000. You got to stop the contract. If there's an emergency, there might be some other kinds of procurement you might have to do, and you might have to follow it. But if it's assuming that it's not something that water is cascading down the hill and crashing into the the building down below, it's something in which if you just slow down everybody and stop, that's what's typically going to happen. You know that it's over 25%. So what you do is you don't make that decision because now it's over 10,000. It's either a small procurement, or you go back and you seek an amendment to the contract and you get council approval to do that. And that's how that would happen. So if it's over 25%, there's a requirement that you basically make certain findings, and the amendment will explain to you how you make those findings. That that these are the reasons we're doing this, and here's why I can't do it for less. Here's why this extra amount's being made, and so then you have essentially a findings that are supported by a rationale that shows this is the reason why I went out and spent $75,000 instead of just going on aimlessly, not really thinking the next day was going to bring type of thing.
No, I agree with everything you said. Technically, you're legally correct. I have no problem with that. First of all, I want to make sure everybody else understood that was the consequences of accepting this paragraph, which is the right thing to do. My only problem with it is it doesn't define the universe. It defines the front end of the universe. If it's under 25, you're okay. Well, implicitly, which is not said here, if it's over 25%, what do you do? And there's no description of what you do. It's like another sentence or two sentences say, you loop back to someplace else. That's what I'm looking for.
And this is legislation, and some of these things might end up being a rule. So what would end up being is your city manager saying, hey, if something goes over your $7,500 or your $75,000, whatever, here is the process that I want you to go through, and these are the kinds of findings I want you to make, and these are the kinds of things. If I'm the city, not doing it, but you're doing it, as an employee, or even if I'm the city manager and I'm making those decisions, here's the rules that you would go by. So this, like you say, does set the front end. In other words, you don't go past go until you do 25, when you're past 25%. But what happens afterwards, then that might be rules that you would fit in. And this isn't an end-all be-all document. There will be a document that goes along with it as a general rule. Once we have this rules established, once you have the law established, then the rules, we call them in the law, we call them administrative rules. Oregon, you might have heard of them, OARs, Oregon Administrative Rules. They base themselves off of the legislation like this, and then you use the rules to fit in the details where you may not have definition that's in the statute.
I would add to what Doug is saying, and Doug probably knows the specific legal term for this. When you have a situation like this where something is not clearly spelled out, the responsibility for approval or rejection automatically falls to the city council. You have the authority to take up any matter that you are not prohibited by law from taking up, or that is not already assigned to some other agency or level of government. So in this case, although it's not spelled out, if an amendment exceeds 25%, it goes to the city council.
And as the person that has to do this, you're comfortable with that process, even though it's not stated?
Oh, I've seen this play out dozens of times. I mean, you'll see an item on the consent agenda. At a city council meeting, the contract was for $10, it wound up costing $13, you need your approval.
And what happens is with those findings, that's what's nice about that, because now you're going to be the ones that's responsible for that guy that went out there and spent $75,000 on a deal. How do you explain that, kind of thing? Well,
How do you find your city
yeah,
manager?
exactly. I mean, it's like, what?
Sensitive day.
So what you end up having is you have, by documenting and going through that process, I know it takes a little bit longer, but then you now have, if this didn't, how can we address this? Because before it was kind of like, oh shoot, that just happened, as opposed to, okay, the next time this happens, we have something to go from to be able to prevent that kind of action from happening. Yeah, so that's the amendment process.
Okay.
You were asking about that.
I just wanted to make sure that, everybody was comfortable with an incomplete universe being described in that paragraph. If you are, we're good. And then one last thing, which I think is a matter of semantics, and my brain doesn't work with it. If you go to page 108, which is again under 30410, it must be on D5, and it's called judicial review. So I think in our discussion before the meeting, I kind of got the gist of what you're saying, but I just want to make sure that there's not a better way to say this or some other
Oh,
word.
it's 304-100, you're saying, and you're talking about protests and appeals?
I think it actually shows up twice.
Yes.
Judicial-
And I wrote down a response for you, okay? So let's take, and this is kind of what we had to go through. Well, we didn't really go through this much detail, because a lot of people in this kind of business already know this kind of stuff. It's okay, I'm glad you guys are asking questions. But what's a sole source? Because that's the easiest one to understand. And that would be in section, okay, you're in section C, so look at 3.04-100, and we're going to go down to section C, and it's called Protests and Judicial Review of Sole Source Procurement, okay? And that language is in there. It's, if you look down at C 5, it says an affected person may not seek judicial review of an election not to make a sole source procurement, okay? All right, so let's talk a little bit what a sole source, this is what a sole source is, all right? There's times where you go out there and you're gonna have to make a decision that doesn't involve competition. In other words, do I have to go out there and do a bid for, all these different kinds of things when there's only one source that I'm looking for? So it doesn't require a competitive bid. The city manager or whomever they delegate makes a written findings that the goods and services or professional services or the engineering or whatever are available from one source only. Okay, so you bought an ABC equipment, all right? And it only takes ABC parts. And those parts get broken on a regular basis, and I can't get them from anywhere else except for ABC. So there's going to be only 3 different places they get ABC, for instance, or maybe there's only, you can only get ABC parts. All right, so the notice goes out, says we are making a sole source selection here. We're giving, the notice goes out, it goes out at the leak for 10 days. If you could look back at 304.0. oh, that's the sole source process. The city manager or his delegate is required to publish notice that this is what we're going to make, these are the factors that we're gonna make a determination on, that this is the only source that we're getting on. And you have a right to protest that. So as a contractor, and you say, no, there's other places and there's other things you could have done. You could use CYD parts for ABC and you can make those kinds of arguments, all right? If you're denied, the city says, no, we're using ABC parts, you can protest that. Say, hey, look, you made the information wrong. There was other alternatives, and you can protest that, okay? And that protest is now determined, and you can go to court on that. You can have a judicial review of that determination as to whether or not, the XYZ was eliminated in that process. All right. And once that decision is made, and once it's all done, and that decision now says, okay, we're using ABC parts, what this says is an affected person, this is your section you're saying, and a judicial review, an affected person may not seek judicial review for denial of a request for, a denial for a request for sole source. So that means that I'm the guy that didn't get the bid. I'm mad because I didn't get the bid, so I want to do that. No, you don't get that choice anymore, because we already made the determination that ABC is the only sole source, not that you didn't get the bid. So you don't get to go to court on that. Now you do get to go to court on making the decision whether or not ABC is the best, or is the only sole source. But short of that, you don't. And judicial review is a I mean, it's a lawsuit. In other words, you're going to bring the city in because you didn't choose me. I was like, no, you had your chance to protest, and we decided that ABC was the time, was what we're selecting from. It wasn't that's not it's not part of the source that we can go from. We're going to go for our sole source from ABC. And you had that opportunity. That just because we're not selecting you this time doesn't mean you get to take it to court. And that's what that means.
And what is paragraph A under? Because it indicates they can.
They can, let me here. Hold on, because I had this up here. Judicial review may be sought from the circuit court for the county in which the principal offices is, okay, the approval of the procurement by a local contract review board, which is what you guys are, under this chapter provides that the available remedies have been exhausted, and that here, sorry. I must have moved my deal here. For special procurements, the approval of class of special, this moved from there to special procurements, a little different than a sole source.
But the language in the ordinance is the same.
Yeah.
I can actually, what Councilor Snyder was saying, you have a sentence that says you may not seek judicial review. That's the essence of the sentence.
Mm-hmm.
You may not seek judicial review. And then the very next paragraph says, well, before seeking judicial review of the approval, you must exhaust all administrative remedies. Well, why would you do remedies before you go to judicial review if the ordinance prohibits you from seeking a judicial review?
Well, because here, I just found it says, if judicial review is sought before the contract is awarded. So they haven't awarded the contract yet. You sent the notice out that says, here's how we're going to make a determination as to the sole source. These are the factors we're looking at in our findings as to that. So a contract awarded pursuant to the contract is conclusively presumed valid. Okay, in other words, we went through all these rules, we found out what the sole source was, determine that sole source based on all of these factors. You can appeal that. But now that we've now determined and made the determination as to what the contract specified specifications are, then that's presumed valid, and you can't then go in and do a judicial review of the fact that you chose someone else besides yourself. Is all I'm saying. In other words, that you awarded the contract to someone else. Because you can't go back and argue that the sole source was the wrong method because they've already made it.
So essentially what this is saying is you can seek judicial review of the decision to seek a sole source contract. You cannot seek judicial review of the award of the sole source contract.
That's correct.
And it would help to actually say that in words.
Well, that's why you have lawyers.
We don't need
No,
lawyers
I
to
agree.
put simple
I
things
mean,
on here.
it is patterned after the statute.
Yeah.
Because sole source and also special procurement are alternatives to different kinds, to the small procurement, which is regulated by, how much the actual contract is. Intermediate procurement is a little bit larger, and there's a little bit more things you have to do to go through the process. One, you can call up on the telephone. The next, you actually have to get written proposals and so on and so forth. With sole source, and it's half of the battle is trying to determine exactly what standards you're going to use to determine whether or not something is a special procurement. There's some kind of unusual thing about procuring that it just doesn't fit within all the other factors. So you have to come up and you actually kind of have to create those standards in order to come up with a special procurement. Someone can argue that's just the wrong creation. You didn't do it right. There's other alternatives and stuff. And if you say, yeah, you're right, and you could adjust it, or you say, no, you're wrong, and we've come up to that. These are the way we're going to make this determination. Well, I'm going to appeal that. Fine, go ahead. So then you appeal it to the circuit court, and the court listens to the findings that the city made, and did they make them? Were more likely than not the right decision? Is it a good call? I always kind of relate it to sports. The indisputable call. Are you going to overrule the refs? Or are the refs close enough? Okay. That's what the court looks at in the judicial review. Did the city make a close enough decision that they've got some discretionary, they're there on the side, people talking, they know exactly what's going on, and we're not going to take the place of the city, but we're going to say, was their decision based on rational decision? That's what a judicial review is of a city's decision. So, did they make the right decision about this being a sole source, or are we going to say that they're completely off base and that doesn't make any sense at all, or are you going to say, yeah, it's pretty close? And then once they make that decision, those are the standards you use for a special procurement or the sole source. Okay, that's done. Now you've made that decision, and now you're using those standards, and you say, okay, such and such franchise is the best price. We're going to pick from the sole source from that, ABC company, John Deere. We're going to get their John Deere tractors, and it's from that source only. This is the only, John Deere. Well, no, this John Deere group over here is going to argue that no, they should have gotten the bid. And it's like, no, it's this group. This is what we're going to get it from. And you can't take that decision back. That's not a judicial decision anymore.
My problem is semantics and of the paragraph. What I'm hearing you say, and if I believe everything you say, which I do, that the paragraph labeled 5 judicial review should not have any language after it. That language is there should be subparagraph A should be B, and C. Because the way it's written now, before seeking is subordinate to the first one. It sounds to me like they're totally different concepts. So just think about this and tell me if this is a better way. Just have the title judicial review for paragraph 5. Now have 3 subparagraphs. A is an affected person, B is before seeking, and C is judicial review. That makes it no longer subordinate, and it makes it another
That's what you're
process.
saying.
That would take out the problem that I have completely.
Before going further, we can always pull this item and you guys can check out the wording, be more precise. We can come back, it's not time, it's not time sensitive, right?
No,
We don't have to do this tonight,
No.
next meeting and kind of pull it together.
be happy to. No, that's not a problem.
No, I think we're down to the point where this word appears two different times. It's simply a matter of organization. I think if he agrees that an affected person, et cetera, is a subparagraph of judicial review, and before seeking judicial review is another subparagraph, it's no longer a senior subordinate relationship, it's an equal relationship, and therefore works for me as a language. Not correct, then we probably do need to pull it and figure out what the right word is.
Well, I would not like to make any major changes to this without going back to it and making sure I get the language right. So, I mean, I would recommend pulling it, and then I'll get the language make sure that when I'm not pulling a cotter pin somewhere or,
Let's go ahead and do that. I think we could spend a lot more time on this.
Yeah, that was the only other thing, but it does appear in two different paragraphs. So
No, I know which one to come up, because they're both in the alternative,
yeah, not time sensitive, obviously, because he's still doing the job, with contracts.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
I knew precision was right, you've gone into it and delved into it.
I want to make sure.
So I'm just gonna pull that ordinance for this evening, okay? We're going to,
Do we need to do that? Is it a motion?
I don't think so.
Date certain, or-
Okay, pull it.
Well, that's one of those kind of referral again to the next, well, it's not a referral, but it's gonna be a postponement until the next.
My guess is that you as the mayor have the authority
Officer to the mayor.
to move it and just say, you know what, I'm gonna close debate and schedule this for next agenda. My guess is you can do that. Might be cleaner to just accept a motion and postpone.
Let's just do a motion.
What do you think?
No, I agree, I want a motion to be just clean as simple as well.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I move that we postpone this agenda item until the next city council meeting.
Second.
Any more discussion, guys? All right, let's do a roll call.
Counselor Westover?
Yes.
Counselor Warren?
Yes.
Counselor Snyder?
Yes.
Mayor Les?
Yes. All right, thank you very much. We're down to city attorney report.
Nothing. Thank you.
City manager,
Nothing for you.
mayor's comments? Okay. We're on the table for council comments.
I'm good too.
I'm also good.
I'm good.
We're all good.
I think our last discussion on contracts kind
Killed everybody.
That's how I'll do it for which one in 2008 city council meeting. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good job, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Or Tuesday, sorry. I'll be the last minute. Do you have time tomorrow?
June 7th.
Yeah. First coming in at 4.
How about 3?
Sure, fine.
Great, we'll see you then.
Okay.